Welcome, all you sinners and sodomites, to episode 57 of Bible Stories for Atheists. I am Josh.
I'm Lindsay.
Setting the tone early. And we are your guides to the morally mundane stories, literally littering the Bible.
Yeah, lots of littering of mundane stories.
Yeah.
Which is unfair because there were actually a lot of interesting stories in this. It's just they tell them a couple times in a row.
And they tell them boringly.
Yeah.
You know, It's like I say in the episode, you kind of have to look past the bullshit to see that it is kind of an interesting story.
Sure.
But it's like just so poorly written. It's so poorly said. You know?
Yeah, for sure. But most of the Bible.
Yeah, I do genuinely think the story of David is a really interesting one. Unlike a lot of the stories in the Bible.
Right.
I don't think anything like you can't look past the bad storytelling to see like a good nugget of a story.
True.
This one actually has like a good nugget.
Like if you made a movie about David and modernized it and like took all the religious bullshit out of it, it would be a good movie.
They actually did do that. I was looking this up. I want to see if I can find it somewhere. There was a TV series that lasted only one season back in like the mid 2000s. Called Kings.
Okay.
And it had Ian McShane.
That's right.
Yeah, is that
McShane,
it? Yeah.
That is a guy. I don't know if he was the one in this show or not, but
he was from like Deadwood.
Sure. Yeah.
He's in American Gods and stuff.
Ian McShane. You are
great.
Correct.
I love this. I love that actor. Anyway, he played essentially King Saul. I think they changed the names of everybody and everything. Right. But what the story was, came across very Shakespearean.
Yeah, it is Shakespearean. The story of David is quite Shakespearean.
Yeah. David was basically a soldier in the army and he ends up like somehow defeating a tank or something like that. Next thing you know, he's in with like the royal family and everything. They did a really great job of it, but they canceled the show after one season.
I'm sure there's reasons.
Yeah.
Religious people probably complained.
Either that or it was too religious. Yeah. I can't remember because I was still religious at the time. Okay. So I might have been like, oh, I like it because God. You know?
Right. I see.
Yeah. But they did do a good job of telling that. And it was like more modern day type of thing. But
it's hard to do modern stories of the Bible like that aren't specific to like Christians.
Right.
And not outrage Christians.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I was thinking the other day about this, like if I ever get the opportunity to make a movie, I think we need to make a gay rom-com based on this story.
Definitely.
You know?
Yes.
This really should be.
Definitely.
I would love to see or have what's his name? Billy Eichner.
Yes.
Do this story, you know?
That would be
modernize
weird
it.
And interesting.
Yeah. We're still covering 1 Samuel. This is chapters 21 through 26. Strap in and strap on for episode 57, Easing Nature with Saul. You went out of your way to just be like right into the microphone with it. You just aimed your mouth at the microphone.
Well, it was away from you.
Right. Slightly like 10 degrees.
It was an effort.
It was like, let me make sure I get the best possible recording of this burp. It wasn't even like the burp you had the other night.
No. the one where
the one
where my soul left my body. Yeah. That one.
Where you exorcised a demon out of your stomach.
You were not impressed.
It was like 5 minutes long.
Made me question our whole relationship.
It was 5 minutes long.
It was not 5 minutes long.
It was just annoying after like the first 3 minutes. 2 minutes is impressive.
5 seconds long. Maybe.
It shook the fucking floor.
That might be true.
Anyway, we have a lot to cover. Shut up. Previously on BSFA. I fucked that up. Previously on BSFA.
He sounded exactly the same to me.
I slurred my words because I had a quarter of a beer. Yeah.
a sip from the beer.
Saul kept trying to kill David because he was jealous of him or afraid of him, or because he was being plagued by evil spirits that God was sending to him. We don't really know. But
all of the above.
Yeah. And we had a listener point out today how stupid it was that his response to being afraid of David usurping his throne is to put him in charge of 1,000 men.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. Like, here's your punishment. Go lead my army.
Right. Oh, darn. That didn't work out.
All of these people love you more than me. Go lead them.
Yeah.
It won't lead to a military coup.
Right. Exactly. David had the greatest tragic gay love story in the Bible with Saul's son, Jonathan.
Yes. We could just call it a love story. The fact that two men are involved implies that it's gay.
Oh, I thought you were saying because I called it a tragic gay love story.
No, you could just call it a tragic love story, I guess. That's my point.
Yeah. Yeah. They both did have penises. We didn't catch allegedly, like, we don't know that they both did.
But again, this is what the Holy Spirit told me.
Right. Exactly. And therefore,
it's true.
We know it's true. We didn't catch this at the time, but we did find a contradiction. In the David and Goliath episode, it said that Samuel wouldn't see Saul again before he died. But in the last episode, we got a story where Saul ends up falling into a prophetic frenzy and does see Samuel again. They didn't seem to have a conversation or anything.
No, they were just naked and frenzying together.
Yeah.
In a group frenzy situation.
Right. Yeah.
I just think they replaced the word frenzy, sex with frenzy in the Bible.
They might have been. There's some, I swear to God, this is such, like, overall,
it's very horny.
It's such a homoerotic
It's just super
story.
Horny. Yeah.
Bread makes you mad? David came to Nob, to the priest Ahimelech. Ahimelech came trembling to meet David and said to him, "Why are you alone and no one with you?" David said to the priest Ahimelech, "The king has charged me with a matter and said to me, 'No one must know anything about the matter about which I send you and with which I have charged you. I have made an appointment with the young men for such and such a place. Now then, what have you at hand? Give me 5 loaves of bread or whatever is here." The priest answered David, "I have no ordinary bread at hand, only holy bread, provided that the young men have kept themselves from women." David answered the priest, "Indeed, women have been kept from us, as always when I go on an expedition. The vessels of the young men are holy, even when it is a common journey. How much more today will their vessels be holy?" So the priest gave him the holy bread, for there was no bread there except the bread of the presence, which is removed from before the Lord, to be replaced by hot bread on the day it is taken away. So yeah, this is a really weird little passage.
It is. It's super, like, I don't know. They say the same things like a lot.
So he's on the run.
Right.
David is on the run.
Right.
Yeah.
So I was just going to say, let's do a refresher. He's on the run, but he is telling him that the king sent him on a mission.
Right.
But really, he's just hungry and wants some bread.
Yep. And so are his people. Yeah.
But he's by himself. What do you mean his people?
Like his men. Like he also has his men. Like that's what he's saying is like my men have.
Does he have men with him?
Yeah.
Actually, or is he just trying to get more bread?
No, he does have men.
Okay.
With him.
Holy men. Whose bodies have been kept from women.
Yeah, their vessels are holy.
Yes.
They're vessels.
They haven't penetrated a woman.
Right. Yeah, I thought it was kind of just funny. Like David's like, no, I make sure they never have sex with women.
Right. It seems like a very weird thing to like emphasize in this conversation, like because they really lean into it.
Yes, that is the least of our problems.
Yes,
You
can only have this bread if they're virgins.
Yeah.
Women virgins, though, like they haven't been with a woman. I didn't say anything else about any sort of other type of thing.
Well,
just women.
And it's not even like you've never had sex with a woman. It's that you haven't had sex with a woman recently. And really, I bet it's like, have you had sex with a woman since the last time you bathed? You know, is the impression I get. Like, you can't do this unless you've cleaned yourself. Probably
of women.
Of women juices.
Ew.
I know.
Gross.
I know. But it's God, right?
We're not fruit.
I'm sorry. Women's secretions.
Thank you.
Is that better?
Yes.
It is. Is it really? Okay.
Fluids also would have been acceptable.
Fluids. Okay.
They said the dude's name a lot too.
Ahimelech.
Yeah, they said it like over and over and over again.
Yeah, which is an interesting thing, because if you feel like this story is familiar at all, which you probably don't, it's because Jesus references this story.
Oh.
When we went through the Gospels, we actually talked about the story.
Okay.
Because Jesus uses the story to demonstrate that human need and mercy are more important than ritualistic observance of the law. So you can actually find this story, the one where Jesus is talking about it, in 3 of the 4 Gospels, the Synoptic Gospels. So it's Matthew 12, 1 through 8, Luke 6, 1 through 5, and Mark 2, 23 through 28. And for old time's sake, here's Mark's version of this, and it's really short. One Sabbath, he was going through the grain fields, and as they made their way, his disciples began to pluck heads of grain. The Pharisees said to him, "Look, why are they doing what is not lawful on the Sabbath?" He said to them, "Have you never read what David did when he and his companions were hungry and in need of food? How he entered the house of God when Abiathar was high priest and ate the bread of the presence, which it is not lawful for any but the priests to eat, and he gave some to his companions. Then he said to them, the Sabbath was made for humankind, and not humankind for the Sabbath. So the Son of Man is Lord even of the Sabbath."
Is that your Jesus voice?
I guess. I was really trying to come up with something more interesting, but that was what I got.
I always picture being like, "Hey, man."
I was kind of thinking that too. I was like, I don't know.
You remember that story about David, man, where he took the bread?
Hey, man. Don't nail me to that thing, man. That was Jesus to a T. So what's different about Mark's version and Luke and Matthew's versions is that Luke and Matthew never mention the name of the high priest, probably because they're based on Mark's version, and they knew that Abiathar was not the high priest that's mentioned in this story. Mm-hmm. Abiathar, as we'll see, is the son of Ahimelech.
Ah.
And he's going to come up in a little bit. But it's interesting that Jesus in this story is saying that Abiathar was the high priest. So It's a error.
Yeah, he forgot the story. I mean, which, you could just chalk up to the human part of his brain.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Except that then he's not perfect.
He is a mudblood.
He's a mudblood. Yeah. How dare you use a racial slur like that?
He's only half wizard.
Right. So that's a big contradiction in the Bible. I feel like it goes to show Jesus was not all knowing, or that it was just written by humans. Mark, whoever actually wrote the Gospel of Mark, made an error when they were referencing this, and then the other Gospels recognized it, and so they took it out.
Right.
And
instead of just fixing it, instead of putting the correct name in there.
Well, they didn't write Mark. They just had it to reference.
What I mean is like in their versions.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah. Yeah, I would guess that they were probably trying not to contradict the Book of Mark.
Okay.
While still like
doing it in lots of places.
Yeah. I don't know. It's a weird thing. I don't know what their mindset totally was, but now a certain man of the servants of Saul was there that day, detained before the Lord. His name was Doeg the Edomite, the chief of Saul's shepherds. David said to Ahimelech, "Is there no spear or sword here with you? I did not bring my sword or my weapons with me because the king's business required haste." The priest said, "The sword of Goliath the Philistine, whom you killed in the valley of Elah, is here, wrapped in a cloth behind the ephod. If you will take that, take it, for there is none here except that one." David said, "There is none like it. Give it to me." So yeah, that's not suspicious. I'm here on the king's business, but I had to leave early. So do you have a sword?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I forgot it.
Yeah.
I was in such a rush to leave that I knew I was forgetting something. I knew like the minute I got like a mile down the road, I was like, fuck, I'm forgetting something. And then I got even further down the road and I was like, oh, my stabby thing. I forgot it. Oh, it's too late to turn back now. I guess I'll just
got my keys. I've got my wallet.
Ask somebody if I can have one later down the road. And they'll do it because, people are cool.
Right. Yeah. Where did I leave that sword from the giant?
Right. I was going to say it just happens to be. Can he even lift that fucking sword?
Right. Yeah. He did it in order to cut off Goliath's head.
Oh, did he?
But yeah, I would imagine it would be quite large.
It's going to be a burden to carry.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. And as far as I've gotten so far in the story of David, it never comes up again. The sword never does. It's not like Sting from Lord of the Rings, Right. Was that it? Was that Sting, I think?
Fucking no.
Yeah. That's not my nerd culture.
That's exactly right.
Even though we had a cat named Frodo.
He came with that name.
I know. Yeah. We talked about this in the David and Goliath episode, that it's a weird story where it's like suddenly Saul forgot David and everything. And it's clearly like been added to this overall story of David. This is the only other time it's mentioned that David fought Goliath that I've seen so far.
Right.
So it seems like it's probably some sort of insertion.
Yeah.
David rose and fled that day from Saul. He went to King Achish of Gath. The servants of Achish said to him, "Is this not David, the king of the land? Did they not sing to one another of him in dances? Saul has killed his thousands and David his 10,000s." David took these words to heart and was very much afraid of King Achish of Gath, so he changed his behavior before them. He pretended to be mad in their presence. He scratched marks on the doors of the gate and let his spittle run down his beard. Achish said to his servants, "Look, you see the man is mad. Why then have you brought him to me? Do I lack madmen that you will have brought this fellow to play the madman in my presence? Shall this fellow come into my house?" So yeah, he's lying to these guys and trying to get aid and comfort.
What's the king's name?
Achish. That's the official pronunciation.
Is it?
No. It's Achish.
Achish.
Maybe. That's not how I pronounce it in the readings, though.
Clearly.
Yeah.
And I like how in one of them you went from Ashish to the word said. So you were like Ashish shed.
Ashish shed.
Ashish shed.
Yeah.
Okay. So he rolls up. This is a king.
Yeah. It's the king of Gath, which Goliath was from Gath.
Okay.
So that's a little bit, and again, not mentioned.
Right.
Not mentioned.
They
that
were like,
this guy
hey,
is
you
the
killed
one
our giant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not mentioned at all.
But he says he's like, oh, aren't you David of David and Saul? You're Saul's little
where the people
boy.
are where the servants point out that he's the person that everybody in the land is saying doing this little rhyme about not even a rhyme. It's like,
it does not rhyme at all.
It's just like a fucking taunt, really, if anything. Yeah.
But it's beneficial to David. Was it beneficial to David or was it mean against David? I guess I didn't really understand if it was an insult or a compliment.
It's not. It's a compliment because it's saying that David has killed tens of thousands of,
and Saul only has killed thousands.
Yeah.
Which they said earlier in this story.
Yes, they did. In the previous episode, they mentioned that was what set Saul off originally.
And why did this make David scared so that he acted crazy?
He's scared because Achish is the is the king of Philistines and stuff like that. So this is Israel's enemy.
Oh,
right.
I see.
He's going to Israel's enemy and asking for, aid and comfort. So he's scared of them,
right?
In theory here. And
so then he acts bonkers.
Yeah. But
because
then again,
they just didn't kill people with mental disease back then.
Right. As if.
Because it wasn't commonplace at all to just kill people who had mind problems.
Yeah. So he's kind of like trying to make it seem like he's not somebody to be fucked with, I guess.
I see. Okay. Like, if you fuck with me, I could do anything.
Yeah.
You know,
I'm crazy.
Yeah.
Starts throwing spears.
See this giant sword I have from the giant of yours I killed?
Yeah.
I could use it.
Nobody mentions like, oh, I've seen that sword before.
Yes. Why do you have that giant anime sword?
Right. Yeah. But he's going to be aligning with the Philistines for a little bit.
Gotcha.
All Doags go to heaven. David leaves. I appreciate the courteous little.
It took me a second.
It is. I noticed the hesitation. David leaves and bounces around for a bit, and we get everyone who was in distress and everyone who was in debt and everyone who was discontented gathered to him, and he became captain over them. Those who were with him numbered about 400. So David is kind of becoming like Robin Hood, in a way.
Yeah.
He becomes like the leader of the loners and stuff like that,
like Jesus.
Kinda, yeah. The leader of the rejects and stuff. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The outsiders.
Right.
He's the pony boy.
Yeah. He's a man of the people. Saul hears that David has been found, and then Saul is staring down all of his servants with a spear in his hand. We get the story, right? Like he's sitting there. He's got a spear in his hand and he's staring them all down, and he goes off on them, basically saying like, what is David going to do for you? Is he going to make you commander? Is that why you're all conspiring against me?
Mm-hmm.
And Doeg speaks up and says that he saw David with Ahimelech. He gave David the sword of Goliath.
Mm-hmm.
And then Saul has Ahimelech, as well as all his father's house, quote unquote, and all the priests at Nob brought in. Saul said to him, why have you conspired against me, you and the son of Jesse, by giving him bread and a sword, and by inquiring of God for him, so that he has risen against me to lie in wait as he is doing today? Then Ahimelech answered the king, who among all your servants is so faithful as David? He is the king's son-in-law and is quick to do your bidding, and is honored in your house. Is today the first time that I have inquired of God for him? By no means. Do not let the king impute anything to his servant, or to any member of my father's house. For your servant has known nothing of all this, much or little. The king said, you shall surely die, Ahimelech, you and all your father's house. The king said to the guard who stood around him, turn and kill the priests of the Lord, because their hand also is with David. They knew that he fled and did not disclose it to me. But the servants of the king would not raise a hand to attack the priests of the Lord. Then the king said to Doeg, you, Doeg, turn and attack the priests. Doeg the Edomite turned and attacked the priests. On that day, he killed 85 who wore the linen ephod. Nob, the city of the priests, he put to the sword, men and women, children and infants, oxen donkeys, and sheep he put to the sword. It's a lot of priests.
I feel like God's not going to like that.
I know. As with most things that go wrong in life, we don't hear much from God on this.
Well, and it does kind of make the whole story a bit confusing on his involvement, because he was super involved at the start.
God's involvement?
Yeah. And, basically up until the point where David joins Saul's cabal or whatever the fuck it is. And then after that, you don't hear about it much. But honestly, like Saul having a bunch of priests killed because they helped David without the knowledge that David was actually...
Yeah, they thought he was...
Yeah.
At least according to the story.
Right.
That's told here. They thought he was on the up and up.
Right.
And everything. He was working for the king.
So the fact that Saul has them all killed, I'm surprised God doesn't pop up and be like, hey, wait a minute here.
Yeah.
Guy whom I appointed, even though I didn't want to.
Right.
And who has been told he's not going to be king for forever because he's a fucking idiot.
Right.
Like, maybe not kill my people if you want this to last longer than it should.
It is an interesting thing. That's a good point, because it is an interesting thing of like when God shows up, when God actually does. It's almost like it's just when the writer can't figure out another way for it to go.
Right.
For what he wants to have happen.
Right.
But one of the sons of Ahimelech, son of Ahitub, named Abiathar, escaped and fled after David. Abiathar told David that Saul had killed the priests of the Lord. David said to Abiathar, I knew on that day when Doeg the Edomite was there that he would surely tell Saul, I am responsible for the lives of all your father's house. Stay with me and do not be afraid, for the one who seeks my life seeks your life. You will be safe with me. It's really interesting how they're painting David in this. As he's a man of the people, leading the rejects, but then also he takes responsibility for stuff. They're really painting him in a
very cinematic character that they've built.
Yeah.
It's definitely got like Rick from The Walking Dead sort of vibe to it, or any sort of like story where there's a leader of a bunch of people who don't have a leader. And they all come together and they all hide behind one person's power.
Right. Yeah. So the Philistines attack a city called Keilah, and David asks God if he should go. God says yes. David's men are like, yeah, no, we're scared to fight these people. So David asks God again, and God's like, yes. So David goes and defeats the Philistines. Okay. And then
the ones that he was asking for shelter with?
No, these are specifically ones that were attacking this one town.
Okay.
So it's like, I don't think it's necessarily the same ones. I assume that Philistines are more like a race, and like you have like different cities. And so this is probably from a different one. But when Abiathar, son of Ahimelech, fled to David at Keilah, he came down with an ephod in his hand. Now it was told to Saul that David had come to Keilah. And Saul said, God has given him into my hand, for he has shut himself in by entering a town that has gates and bars. Saul summoned all the people to war, to go down to Keilah and besiege David and his men. When David learned that Saul was plotting evil against him, he said to the priest Abiathar, bring the ephod here. David said, O Lord, the God of Israel, your servant has heard that Saul seeks to come to Keilah to destroy the city on my account. And now, will Saul come down as your servant has heard? O Lord, the God of Israel, I beseech you, tell your servant. The Lord said, he will come down. Then David said, will the men of Keilah surrender me and my men into the hand of Saul? The Lord said, they will surrender you. Then David and his men, who were about 600, set out and left Keilah. They wandered wherever they could go. When Saul was told that David had escaped from Keilah, he gave up the expedition. David remained in the strongholds in the wilderness. in the hill country of the wilderness of Ziph. Saul sought him every day, but the Lord did not give him into his hand. So Saul's, tracking him down. What I just thought it was really weird with this one that he gave up the expedition, but yet still sought him every day.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, well, which is it?
Right. Yeah.
But it's clearly that he's going to keep going after him because we keep getting stories of
Is
him.
Obsessed.
Yes, he's obsessed. He's his white whale.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Just really trying to harpoon him.
It's true.
Yeah.
It's true. This is perhaps the influence for Moby Dick.
Right. Yeah. Turns out the entire time the white whale was King David.
Right. Right.
Yeah. A shitty way to die. David was in the wilderness of Ziph at Horesh when he learned that Saul had come out to seek his life. Saul's son, Jonathan, set out and came to David at Horesh. There he strengthened his hand through the Lord. He said to him, "Do not be afraid, for the hand of my father Saul shall not find you. You shall be king over Israel, and I shall be second to you. My father Saul also knows that this is so." Then the two of them made a covenant before the Lord. David remained at Horesh, and Jonathan went home. I think this is their last time together.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's sad.
I know. It's a nice little reconnecting moment that they have.
Where he is like, "I'll be your second."
Yeah. We could just be together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You'll lead and I'll be there right with you.
Yeah.
And we'll wake up every morning and have coffee. And
Oh, it's sweet.
it is sweet.
So some folks from Ziph are real dicks, and they go to Saul and rat out that David is hiding there. Saul goes down to find them, but then is told that the Philistines are raiding his land. So he has to go back, and David escapes. When Saul returned from following the Philistines, he was told, "David is in the wilderness of En-Gedi." Then Saul took 3,000 chosen men out of all Israel and went to look for David. He came to the sheepfolds beside the road where there was a cave, and Saul went in to relieve himself. Now David and his men were sitting in the innermost parts of the cave. The men of David said to him, "Here is the day of which the Lord said to you, I will give your enemy into your hand, and you shall do to him as it seems good to you." Then David went and stealthily cut off a corner of Saul's cloak. Afterward, David was stricken to the heart because he had cut off the corner of Saul's cloak. He said to his men, "The Lord forbid that I should do this thing to my Lord, the Lord's anointed, to raise my hand against him, for he is the Lord's anointed." So David rebuked his men severely and did not permit them to attack Saul. Then Saul got up and left the cave and went on his way.
What?
Yeah. So Saul went in to relieve himself. The vast majority of the versions say that phrase. But there are some interesting alternatives, such as the King James Version. Saul went in to cover his feet.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that he wouldn't pee on them?
I'm thinking it's to take a shit.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah, because
it's so he doesn't shit on them.
Right.
Somehow, I feel like you're doing it really wrong
right.
if you end up shitting on your feet. The New King James Version says Saul went in to attend his needs, which that makes it sound like he was jerking off. The Aramaic Bible in plain English says Saul entered the cave and slept there. So they're saying sleep.
Right.
And then the Douay Reams Bible says, into which Saul went to ease nature.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
That's what I'm going to say when I have to poop.
Right.
I have to go ease nature.
I'm going to use the cover my feet thing. I'm going to go to the bathroom and cover my feet. In what?
It will be nice because you hate the word poop.
Yes, I do. It's weird that I'm more okay with shit.
Yeah, I know. You just hate the word poop.
But nobody ever uses crap anymore either.
No.
Yeah.
No.
That was a very 90s
I gotta go
thing.
take a crap.
Yeah.
It just sounds stupid.
I know. It sounds like a middle schooler thing. Yeah.
So Saul's pooping.
Yeah.
And David cuts off a corner of his cloak.
Right.
And then feels real bad about it.
Yeah.
Like really bad.
Yeah. It's an interesting thing where they're trying to paint him like he has reverence for Saul because he has reverence for God.
Right.
You know, and he sees him still as God's anointed
But
one.
so therefore he hasn't had an actual conversation with God, because if he had, he would know that God doesn't really like Saul.
Right. Yeah.
He's not God's anointed. He's God's, this guy will do.
Yeah. He was tall. He was tall.
Yes.
Yeah.
He stood out in a crowd.
Yeah. He was easy to spot.
Yep.
Yeah. So
and then he yells at his men.
Yeah, because they were kind of goading him on
yes.
to kill him.
This is the guy God said he would deliver your enemy into your hand, and look,
here it is.
he's pooping.
Yeah.
What better opportunity are you gonna get? And so David, instead of, I don't know, slitting his throat, or cutting off his dick, or anything else, he just cuts off a tiny little corner of the dude's robe
without him noticing.
And what is that gonna do?
Right. Well, it'll come up in a second.
Oh, all right.
That's it, though. It's a device for what's coming next.
I see.
Afterward, David also rose up and went out of the cave and called after Saul, "My lord, the king." When Saul looked behind him, David bowed with his face to the ground and did obeisance. David said to Saul, "Why do you listen to the words of those who say, 'David seeks to do you harm'? This very day, your eyes have seen how the Lord gave you into my hand. And some urged me to kill you, but I spared you. I said, I will not raise my hand against my Lord, for he is the Lord's anointed. See, my father, see the corner of your cloak in my hand? For by the fact that I cut off the corner of your cloak and did not kill you, you may know for certain that there is no wrong or treason in my hands. I have not sinned against you, though you are hunting me to take my life. May the Lord judge between me and you. May the Lord avenge me on you, but my hand shall not be against you. As the ancient proverb says, out of the wicked comes forth wickedness. But my hand shall not be against you. Against whom has the king of Israel come out? Whom do you pursue? A dead dog? A single flea? May the Lord therefore be judge and give sentence between me and you. May he see to it and plead my cause and vindicate me against you." Calling out like, hey, see, I could have killed you.
Right. And I didn't.
And then like going on and on and on and on because it's the Bible and nobody can just say things in 5 words.
It's true. And because like if I were Saul and he said all that, like I would have wanted to like step in a long time ago and be like, all right. Stop talking.
Yeah. Well, you don't know is he's thrown 3 spears in that time that David was saying that. David just keeps dodging.
He's bullet timing them.
Yeah. That's what God gave him. He gave him superpowers. Like we're watching One Piece. We just started watching that the other day. God gave him the stretchy powers.
Oh,
so
he ate the devil fruit that gave him the gum powers.
Yeah. When David had finished speaking these words to Saul, Saul said, "Is this your voice, my son David?" Saul lifted up his voice and wept. He said to David, "You are more righteous than I, for you have repaid me good, whereas I have repaid you evil. Today you have explained how you have dealt well with me, in that you did not kill me when the Lord put me into your hands. For who has ever found an enemy and sent the enemy safely away? So may the Lord reward you with good for what you have done to me this day. Now I know that you shall surely be king, and that the kingdom of Israel shall be established in your hand. Swear to me, therefore, by the Lord, that you will not cut off my descendants after me, and that you will not wipe out my name from my father's house." So David swore this to Saul. Then Saul went home, but David and his men went up to the stronghold. So that's done. You might even say Saul's forgiven. Yeah, like all's forgiven.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Saul seems to forgive David.
Right. Because basically he realizes, like, out of all of history, no one's ever been this close to an enemy and not killed them.
Right.
But David did. So therefore he shows great restraint.
Yes.
And I'm an idiot for chasing after him, for taking 3,000 men, taking our entire country's resources of strong men to go chase after this one guy who is no threat to us whatsoever. I haven't misused my power or the nation's resources at all. I'm just going to give up.
I know. How much money is he spending on chasing down David?
Oh my gosh.
You know?
Too much.
Right. Love octahedron.
Love octahedron?
Yeah.
8 people?
Yeah. I might be summarizing with that, like you just taking a wild guess at the shape.
Okay.
But
octahedron a thing? I
believe so.
Isn't it just an octagon?
I think an octahedron, I might be wrong, but I think an octahedron is a 3-dimensional one.
Oh.
Like a dice, you know, an 8-sided
But it's not
dice.
a love pyramid.
Well, it depends on how many sides there are.
It's a love triangle.
It's a love pyramid when they're all bisexual.
Okay, so it is basically 2 pyramids stacked base to base.
2 pyramids, so 3-dimensionally. Yeah, so it would be an 8-sided die.
Yeah.
Now, Samuel died, and all Israel assembled and mourned for him. They buried him at his home in Ramah. Then David got up and went down to the wilderness of Paran. And that's basically the last we hear of that.
Oh my gosh, Samuel just died?
At least for this episode, yeah. It's weird, folks.
The last time we see Samuel, he's just part of this naked prophetic frenzy group.
Yeah.
And now he's dead. But this is his book.
Yeah. And it's not done. We're still in 1 Samuel. We still have 2 Samuel to go. And they said that he wrote the book, you know.
But he died.
But he died. So obviously he did not write the book. Like they obviously would think he wrote everything up to him dying.
Right.
But then, you know, yeah. So it's not much that he actually would have written if he had written this.
Well, he
book.
wasn't even there for most of it. How could he have written it? Unless he made it all up.
Because God. It's the same old answer you always get.
I hate it.
I know. Like I said, that's last we hear of it. It's weird that folks think he wrote. Oh, and I already said that. So never mind.
And then David goes into the woods.
And then David goes off to the wilderness of Paran. So David sends 10 of his men to ask this rich guy for some provisions. And the guy denies them. He's like, "Who is this son of Jesse? A bunch of servants are leaving their masters. Am I supposed to feed all of them?" Which is, again, an interesting thing that, like, it's almost like word is getting around that, like, all of his people are people who have, like, been servants who left their masters and are joining him.
Right.
You know, again, Robin Hood, like, you know. So anyway, Nabal, this rich guy, has a wife named Abigail who is, quote, clever and beautiful.
Okay.
Unquote.
So she's dangerous.
Right. Yes. David preps his men, it sounds like, to attack Nabal because he's refusing to give him provisions. You know.
Yeah. I asked for free stuff and you didn't give it to me, so now I'm going to attack you?
Right. Because he's a good guy.
Yeah. Okay.
But one of the servants tells Abigail that David's people basically helps them do their jobs and keep their livestock safe and stuff like that. But her husband has insulted them, you know? So this is Abigail's response to that. Then Abigail hurried and took 200 loaves, 2 skins of wine, 5 sheep ready dressed, 5 measures of parched grain, 100 clusters of raisins, and 200 cakes of figs. She loaded them on donkeys and said to her young men, "Go on ahead of me, I am coming after you." But she did not tell her husband Nabal. As she rode on the donkey and came down under cover of the mountain, David and his men came down toward her, and she met them. Now David had said, "Surely it was in vain that I protected all that this fellow has in the wilderness, so that nothing was missed of all that belonged to him. But he has returned me evil for good. God do so to David, and more also, if by morning I leave so much as one male of all who belong to him." Sounds like David's men were protecting this guy's sheep and stuff like that. And then when David wanted something in return, the guy rejects him. So David was going to kill all the male livestock in response. That's what it sounds like to me.
Gotcha.
And then Abigail pleads with David at great length, which I'm going to spare you from, to put the blame on her as opposed to her shitty husband.
Right.
She says that her husband is an ill-natured fellow, and David takes her offering and blesses her.
Women always protecting their rich husbands.
Yes. Abigail came to Nabal. He was holding a feast in his house, like the feast of a king. Nabal's heart was merry within him, for he was very drunk. So she told him nothing at all until the morning light. In the morning, when the wine had gone out of Nabal, his wife told him these things, and his heart died within him. He became like a stone. About 10 days later, the Lord struck Nabal, and he died. When David heard that Nabal was dead, he said, "Blessed be the Lord who has judged the case of Nabal's insult to me and has kept back his servant from evil. The Lord has returned the evil doing of Nabal upon his own head." Then David sent word to Abigail to make her his wife. When David's servants came to Abigail at Carmel, they said to her, "David has sent us to you to take you to him as his wife." She rose and bowed down with her face to the ground and said, "Your servant is a slave to wash the feet of the servants of my Lord." Abigail got up hurriedly and rode away on a donkey. Her 5 maids attended her. She went after the messengers of David and became his wife. David also married Ahinoam of Jezreel. Both of them became his wives. Saul had given his daughter Michal, David's wife, to Palti, son of Laish.
So Saul's wife, the one that, not Saul's wife, Saul's daughter.
Yeah, Michal.
That it
Michal.
was David's wife,
right?
Who was doing him solids left and right.
Right, got him out of there when he was like did the whole Ferris Bueller thing,
right?
Of like hiding,
yes,
of making it look like an idol was him in the bed.
Yes. So her dad
married her off,
even though she was already married.
Yeah,
David married her off to somebody else.
Yeah,
David doesn't seem to care.
Probably not.
Now he's got 2
He's more
new
concerned
wives.
about Jonathan, but
well, I mean, honestly, for real, right?
Yeah.
But
in the meantime, he got 2 new wives. Yeah.
I just
Abigail, who we learned about, and then this other person.
I have such a hard time with these storylines where these women are just being like passed around. It takes away from the whole rest of the story for me, because it's like the dude died. Okay, so let's walk through this scenario and then let's tell you what I would do.
Okay.
So Abigail goes home.
Yeah.
And her husband is throwing a giant party and he's drunk. So she decides to wait until the next day when he's sober to tell him what happened with David.
Yeah.
Not Saul, whatever the fuck guy's name was.
Nabal. Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know what his reaction is weird. I don't understand it.
When the wine had gone out in Nabal, his wife told him these things, and his heart died within him, and he became like a stone.
Is it because he realized that he felt bad?
I don't know. And
then he dies.
Weird. Yeah. It's almost like God just strikes him,
right,
with like an illness. For some reason, when he hears about this, just out of nowhere, it doesn't make any sense.
Right.
Like, you're not crazy for thinking like, what the fuck does it? It doesn't make any sense.
I
And then so his heart dies.
Yeah.
And he becomes like a stone, but it's still 10 days later
that
before
he actually dies.
Yeah.
And then he dies, and then instantly David's like, well, now Abigail, you are my wife.
Yeah.
And she's like, okay.
And so is Ahinoam, who we've never heard anything about.
Some other random person.
Yeah.
I would have gone to the husband and seen that he was drunk and told him everything.
You like if you were Abigail?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Whilst he was drunk. And then not said anything to him the next day.
Right.
Because eventually he'd be like, where did why are we missing 200 loaves of bread?
Yeah.
And then
where are all my raisin clusters?
Yeah. And I'd be like, I told you about this the other night. Don't you remember? And he would be like, no. And you would be like, well, yeah, maybe you should stop drinking so much because I told you.
You never listen to me.
And then everyone would have lived happily ever after.
Right. Yeah.
Also, the minute David was like, oh, your husband just died, you're my wife now, I'd have been like, you know what? No, I'm good. I'm just going to stay here and be a rich widow because where's all his money going? Do they not have children?
Yeah, it's a good question. Like, yeah, does that money end up getting transferred to David? I bet it does. I bet that's what the whole point of the story is that Nabal is this rich guy and then David ends up getting all of that.
Including his wife.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Also, I guess like they don't mention that they have sons or anything. So
being a woman back then is just the worst. And I don't know how often we have to keep saying this, but it really is terrible how they treat women in the Bible.
Yeah.
And it's no shock to me that it takes as long as it has for women to even like make a little bit of headway in the terms of like, we're not property.
Right. Yeah.
Because entire fucking civilizations have been built on this idea.
Yeah. And steeped in culture.
Right. Yeah. I really liked David up until this point. So it's like my opinion on him has changed a little bit with all of these shenanigans.
Yeah.
And it is a bit like, so I feel like even in the Robin Hood story, there's some things that Robin Hood does where it's like, come on, dude. You know, it's a little too far.
Yeah. You don't have to be that tough on the sheriff of Nottingham.
Well, that guy, whatever, but.
Yeah. But I thought we already. Never mind. Whatever. Then the Ziphites came to Saul at Gibeah, saying, David is hiding on the hill of Hachilah. So Saul rose and went down with 3,000 chosen men of Israel to seek David. Saul encamped beside the road, but David remained in the wilderness. When he learned that Saul had come after him, David sent out spies and learned that Saul had indeed arrived. Then David came to the place where Saul had encamped, and David saw the place where Saul lay, with Abner, the commander of his army. Saul was lying within the encampment, while the army was encamped around him. Then David said to Ahimelech and to Abishai, who will go down with me into the camp to Saul? Abishai said, I will go down with you. So David and Abishai went to the army by night. There Saul lay sleeping within the encampment, with a spear stuck in the ground at his head, and Abner and the army lay around him. Abishai said to David, God has given your enemy into your hand today. Now, therefore, let me pin him to the ground with one stroke of the spear. I will not strike him twice. But David said to Abishai, do not destroy him, for who can raise his hand against the Lord's anointed and be guiltless? David said, as the Lord lives, the Lord will strike him down, or his day will come to die, or he will go down into battle and perish. The Lord forbid that I should raise my hand against the Lord's anointed. But now take the spear that is at his head and the water jar, and let us go. So David took the spear that was at Saul's head and the water jar, and they went away. No one saw it or knew it, nor did anyone awake, for they were all asleep, because a deep sleep from the Lord had fallen upon them.
That's to cover the people who were like, were they whisper fighting in front of all of these people and nobody woke up?
They're literally standing right
Yeah.
over Saul. And he's like, yeah, seriously, I'll just stab him with
Yeah.
it, right? Like, I can do it right now. Ah, shit, I kicked his head. I think he's all right. It must be the Lord.
The Lord put a deep sleep on them, like fucking Sleeping Beauty. Don't kiss him.
Just throws that in right at the end. Like, oh, okay.
Right. God, plus they, as you pointed out with the title of this is they already did this.
Yeah. It's totally a duplicate story.
Like,
and it
exactly.
gets more duplicate-y as the story goes on.
It's like, it's stupid. It doesn't make sense why we would go through this again, because literally the conclusion of the last one was that Saul was like, my bad.
Yeah. It's all fine.
And then it's like that none of that ever happened.
Totally didn't happen. Yep. It's completely
up until the point were they in the same place they were, like Zither or whatever the fuck it was?
These are Ziphites came to Saul and said that he was hiding.
Was he in Ziph?
I want to say it was. Yeah, I can't remember exactly where it was, but I want to say it was. I don't know if this is like literally the same spot, but
yeah.
It's so hard to keep track because I feel like not only do the names of these people change, like the Ziphites have never come up before,
right? But
also, like, as the time progresses, as we go through the Bible and we go through these different eras, this hundreds of years after Joshua and stuff like that, who had control of which areas has completely changed. One thing I wanted to point out, it said, then David said to Ahimelech, I realized after I recorded the reading that I shouldn't have taken out there. It does say Ahimelech the Hittite.
Okay.
There. And I took that out.
Ahimelech is the name of the one priest that he did.
Right. And he died. Right. So they clarify that this is Ahimelech the Hittite.
Okay.
In there. So it's not necessarily
the same.
I kind of wonder if they added in the Hittite later because it was a it was a bad translation. Like, it would be interesting if that was the case, if like in some other version, Abiathar was the one who was the priest who was in charge when David came and talked to him. And then that's what Mark's gospel was referencing.
Right.
But, you never know.
We'll never know.
Yeah. It's just an interesting little thing here. But I wanted to point out that this isn't technically a contradiction.
Gotcha.
Then David walks off into the darkness and calls to Abner. Abner wakes up, apparently sees the spear and the water jar are missing. That's the first thing he looks for. And basically yells back that whoever they are taking those things was wrong. Saul recognized David's voice and said, "Is this your voice, my son David?" David said, "It is my voice, my lord, O king." He added, "Why does the Lord pursue his servant? For what have I done? What guilt is on my hands? Now, therefore, let my lord the king hear the words of his servant. If it is the Lord who has stirred you up against me, may he accept an offering. But if it is mortals, may they be cursed before the Lord. For they have driven me out today from my share in the heritage of the Lord, saying, 'Go, serve other gods.' Now, therefore, do not let my blood fall to the ground away from the presence of the Lord. For the king of Israel has come out to seek a single flea, like one who hunts a partridge in the mountains." Then Saul said, "I have done wrong. Come back, my son David, for I will never harm you again. Because my life was precious in your sight today, I have been a fool and have made a great mistake." David replied, "Here is the spear, O king. Let one of the young men come over and get it. The Lord rewards everyone for his righteousness and his faithfulness. For the Lord gave you into my hand today, but I would not raise my hand against the Lord's anointed. As your life was precious today in my sight, so may my life be precious in the sight of the Lord, and may he rescue me from all tribulation." Then Saul said to David, "Blessed be you, my son David. You will do many things and will succeed in them." So David went his way, and Saul returned to his place.
It's so boring when you already heard the story.
I know. Well, imagine when we get to Chronicles and like it's literally retelling all the stuff from.
Is it?
We haven't gotten there yet, but
I hate it already.
That's why we're gonna cover it at the same time as we're covering the Samuel King stuff.
Gotcha.
So that we're not just doing it all over again.
Good.
Yeah.
Because I'll fall asleep.
Yeah. You're already getting close today. I think Lindsay needed a nap before doing this.
Possibly.
Yeah.
Possibly. It's yes and no, because I 100% have the type of like brain that if I'm doing something monotonous, I get sleepy. So even when I'm at work and I'm like,
you're saying our podcast is monotonous.
No, listen. Even when I'm at work and I'm doing like processing that doesn't involve a lot of thinking, it makes me sleepy.
Well, yeah.
So when I hear, and it's not our podcast being monotonous, it's fucking Bible.
Yeah. It is.
And so when they tell the same stories over and over and over again, my brain is like, I don't need to listen to this. I've already heard it once. And then I get sleepy. It's just the constant motion of my thoughts that keeps me awake.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I'd be sleeping all the time.
I mean, that is true. You are easy to fall asleep too.
Yes.
You fall asleep very easy.
I do.
It's your weird superpower.
It is my very unhelpful mutant ability.
Yeah. I mean, it's helpful to you.
Just me, and not all the time. Like, right, I don't want to be sleepy right now.
Right. You haven't fully learned how to control your powers.
I don't want to be sleepy while I'm working.
Yeah. The more I think about it, the story of David is actually a pretty epic one. Like, especially once we get all the way through it. Mm-hmm. If you step back and you kind of take the bullshit of the Bible out of it, it's an interesting story of like, Saul was the anointed one and was supposed to be the ruler and everything, but then like he falls out, and so this other kid, this humble beginnings, is found, and he gets brought into the family, the royal family. He's set up to marry the daughter, but he obviously is in love with the son,
right?
And there's the secret thing going on there, and then and there's something interesting between Saul and him too, and it's kind of an interesting story.
Yes, of course.
And Saul falls out with him. He gets jealous of him and everything, and so he goes on the run.
Also, Saul has schizophrenia.
Yeah. And so David goes on the run and stuff. Like, it's a cool. You could write a really cool story for this.
The Bible's ruined it.
But the Bible, just the old way of telling stories back then, does kind of ruin it. I wish a Greek. This sounds a little bad, maybe like culturally insensitive or something like that. But I kind of wish the Greeks had written this story because, if you look at the Odyssey or something like that, like I really do kind of feel like this is.
Have you read the Odyssey?
Yeah, when I was a kid, when I was in high school.
You're not just thinking about watching the movies, right?
I don't think so. I'm pretty sure we read it.
The Odyssey and the Iliad. Did you read both of them?
I never read the Iliad. I read the Odyssey.
They're not. The only reason they're easy to read is because they've been retranslated over and over and over and over and over again.
Which is valid, yeah. But the content of it seems like it's.
I don't. I want to say it's probably changed and updated over time.
Yeah.
I mean, if you try to read one of the listen.
Yeah.
I tried to read the original version of Gulliver's Travels. And that shit is hard to read.
Jonathan Swift, right?
Yeah. It's hard. Yeah. It's hard to read without a modern translation of that book. So I would say that maybe the Greeks could have zhuzhed it up a little bit.
Yeah.
But I also think that just a good fucking editor would have done the trick.
Right. I don't know if the Greeks were trying to make the Odyssey come across as really happened, No. It was supposed to be a fictional story.
It's an oral tale
that
somebody eventually wrote down. I mean, they can't even say that Homer was the person that wrote it.
Right. He was probably just the one that compiled it together.
Possibly, or the person who told it the most around the fucking campfire or something like that.
Told it the best, probably, yeah. But I kind of get the feeling, the more we go through this, that's kind of what this is for this culture, for the Israelite culture, was like, this was them taking these oral traditions and trying to turn it into an epic, you know, because this is probably, I don't know, I'm not a Bible scholar, but I would bet this is probably coming together around the time that the Greeks were putting together their epics too. So there's like that cultural aspect of like, oh, they have this grand story that they've been telling, and that's cool. Like, what if we came up with something like that?
I mean, but let's also throw Indian culture in there too, because their epics are bigger and more intricate than anybody else's.
Sure. Yeah.
I think the Mahabharata is like one of the most ancient epic tales ever told.
Yeah.
So I would imagine it's just one of those things that people feel like they needed to do, but also like cut out the duplicate stories. That's all you need to do. It's not hard. Like, whoever compiled this should have said, okay, clearly these are the same story, just told a little bit differently. It's not two separate occurrences.
Yeah.
So why are we treating it like it's two separate occurrences?
Yeah.
Or do we really want to say that Saul came after this kid twice?
Right.
Even though it was resolved once? Doesn't that seem crazy to anybody?
Yeah.
Anybody think that's crazy? Is it just me?
Right. And likely the reason for that is for political reasons, that they end up keeping both, because one group likes this story because that's what they were told, and the other group likes this story.
Just make two fucking versions.
I know. Yeah. Well, that's how you end up getting like denominations and stuff. And they're trying to unify everybody.
I see. Well, that didn't work long term.
No, it didn't. It was a very temporary solution that caused very permanent problems.
Yes.
Yeah. Anyway, so that's it for this episode. You know, we got through David running.
Was this the one that you said had something pretty cool in it?
That's next episode.
Oh, okay.
Next episode, first of all, is going to be shorter. We have a lot less readings. Yeah, which will help because we're recording this episode and the next one at the same time, and Lindsay barely made it through this one. Lindsay was so close to falling asleep in these. I'm glad I cut out some of these readings were longer, and I cut them out like just last day or so.
It makes it sound like I have like narcolepsy or something.
I think you're not always like that. Like, this is just like how today went for you, you know. But there are times where most of the time you're like right on it. You're following along.
It depends. It really depends on the quality of the material.
Yeah.
So, okay. Well, I look forward to whatever comes up being pretty cool.
Yeah, it's kind of I'm a little upset that this doesn't line up with Halloween because the next one is kind of like a horror story in it. Yeah.
Yay.
Yeah. They all lived miserably ever after. Thank you so much for checking out our podcast. Help us grow the audience by sharing us with your friends or giving us a share on social media. And we love hearing from you. You can reach out on our website at bsfa.cc.
Can we stop at the next rest stop? I have to cover my feet.